Yeah, g'day. It's fugitive Australian journalist Shane Delling from the website kangaroocourtofaustralia.com. Now, today I published an article titled Prime Minister Anthony Albanese sacks Freedom of Information Commissioner Leo Hardiman by constructive dismissal. Now, a constructive dismissal is when you force someone to resign. One typical example is when the boss doesn't want you working there, they'll bully and harass you, or they might give you too many shifts to work, so you're working too many hours and you can't handle it, so you resign, or they mightn't give you enough, so you're not making enough money. But another way is to just basically make sure you can't do your job properly. And that's what Mr. Hardiman has alluded to in his resignation letter, which he's published on the internet on his LinkedIn page. So that in itself says that he's gone public, and he's obviously not very happy, the fact that he has been, in effect, forced to resign. And the key paragraph in his resignation letter, which he's published on the internet, says, "I have come to the view that I will not be able, in the absence of those changes, to increase timeliness of IC reviews and access in a way that which best promotes the objects of the Freedom of Information Act. I've accordingly decided the most appropriate course is to resign my appointment." Now, if you read the full letter, you know he couldn't do his job. Freedom of information is very important. His job is to review freedom of information requests where the person who's made the request isn't happy with the outcome. They've refused to hand over X amount of documents, or they've redacted a lot of the documents that they have handed over. I'll give you one example. I filed a freedom of information request back in 2014, I think it was, and that was against the Australian National Library. Someone had written to them and demanded they stop archiving my website. They had a service where they archived Australian websites, and they'd been archiving mine for a while, and someone wrote to them and said, look, we demand you stop archiving it, in effect, because they claimed there's defamatory material on there. But so I filed a freedom of information request to try and find out who it was, asking for all the documents relating to that. And they responded, but they still redacted a lot of the details, so I didn't know who it was still. So I filed for a review. The review gave me the same response, because if you don't get what you want, you can ask them to review it higher up within the organisation. They reviewed it and they still gave me bugger all. So I filed a complaint or a review with the Freedom of Information Commissioner, and I won. And it turns out the person who made a complaint was Kerry Stokes, owner of the Channel 7 and the 7 Network, etc. And who was the chairman of the Australian National Library at that time? His son, Ryan Stokes. So you had Kerry Stokes making a complaint to the library, whose chairman was Ryan Stokes, and then refusing to tell me who made the complaint, even after I'd made a freedom of information request and then asked for it reviewed. They had lawyers advising them. They knew they legally they had to hand it over, because they had all these lawyers advising me. They knew they couldn't withhold that information, but they did, because they're so corrupt and dodgy. And when I filed a complaint with the Freedom of Information Commissioner, he reviewed it and I won. I didn't win everything. I didn't get everything I wanted, but I found out who it was. So that's what the Freedom of Information Commissioner does. Now, what the problem is with him in his role, he's got something like 1,000 or 1,500 or 2,000 reviews he's trying to do, because they won't give him the resources or the legislation that he needs to properly do his job. So that is a constructive dismissal, and that's what he's in effect said in his letter. And the Sydney Morning Herald has written an article which in effect says that. They don't use the term constructive dismissal. They just outline his reasoning for resigning, etc. And the former federal senator, Rex Patrick, who was an independent senator, he set up a company which specialises in advising people on freedom of information requests. And he said it was a big loss for Mr. Hardiman to resign. So it's such an open and blatant constructive dismissal where they've undermined him so he couldn't do his job. Now, you have to remember, Anthony Albanese in the Labor Party, one of their key driving points they made during the election campaign last year, 2022, when they were trying to get elected, is they're going to be more open and accountable. Well, they're clearly not. Not just that, the way they're undermining freedom of information. I've got a lot more to say on that. I've currently been investigating a certain issue there. I won't go into too much detail, but I've been investigating a certain issue there for a number of months, and I'll be writing about that sometime in the near future, where you'll find that freedom of information is actually going backwards, if anything, under the Anthony Albanese government. We all know under Scott Morrison, they were a very secretive government, very corrupt government. They didn't want anyone knowing anything. Well, it's looking like the Anthony Albanese government isn't much better. And when you add that together with the fact that the Anthony Albanese government lied about the National Anti-Corruption Commission, saying they were going to have public hearings. Then when they get to power, they say, yeah, we're going to have public hearings, but only in exceptional circumstances. It was a big lie. The Australian public was sucker punched like no tomorrow on that. So make sure you go to my website, read the article I published today on Mr. Hardiman's resignation. You'll have links there. You'll have further information. And you've got to remember, he was less than 12 months into a 5-year contract, getting paid something I think like $350,000 a year. He was a long-term public servant. He'd worked in the government solicitor's office for something like 28 years or more. He'd worked under Labor and Liberal and National, so he wasn't a political puppet appointed by Scott Morrison. He was appointed in March last year and started in April 2022. So I don't think he was a political puppet, and I don't think the Albanese was trying to get rid of him because of his political allegiances. He'd worked under both Labor and Liberal and National, so I think he was a truly independent appointment. Which in itself reinforces the fact that there's a constructive dismissal. Very dodgy, very corrupt. Anyhow, Kangaroo Court of Australia's independent media, so please support my Patreon account and please share this video on Facebook and Twitter, etc. Thank you for your time and have a good day.